whole then you'll be able to do it at your own pace. So for Carla and Aramita and Charles, let me bring you up to date a little bit. These lessons are being recorded by Sister Wendy, who is sending them out to people who cannot be with us today. So everybody's getting this, and this, what, Wendy, 50 more people, 60 more people, quite a few. But it's much nicer when we can see each other and talk to each other. And so let's get started. If you've got Seminole Creole Revitalization Project session number 5 in front of you, I just say that if you've been following this closely for the past several months, half a year, you should have a handle on how this language works. And again, for you newly joined folk, let me stress that we are not talking about a funny kind of English. We are talking about a separate language that has drawn most of its words from English, but it's not English. And if you have a linguistic train of mind, you might consider that most of the words in English itself, historically, are not English words, not Anglo-Saxon words. They're from French or Latin, but we still call it English. So we're looking at Afro-Seminole. I think we should move towards giving it its own name, which would be Muskogo. Bit of a problem there because Muskogo also applies to a Native American population, a First Nations population. But when we talk to each other and we say Muskogo, we know what we mean. And when we say Seminole, we know what we mean, because there are African Seminoles and there are Native American Seminoles. And for the most part, we're talking about the African descent Seminoles. Okay, so we're not looking at a kind of Uncle Remus sort of English. We're looking at a language that has drawn maybe 85, 90% of its vocabulary from English, but it's still not English, because the true test is the grammar. And Seminole grammar is certainly not English. It's Creole. And because it's Creole, it belongs to a whole family of related sister languages, which are also Creoles, such as Jamaican, such as Sranan in Suriname, such as Gullah Geechee on the East Coast, such as Creole in West Africa. There are millions and millions of people who speak sister languages to Afro-Seminole. One thing about this kind of language, Creole languages, is that they have emerged in situations where there has been a dominant society, a control society. Europeans, white folks, Bakras. And so when the Creole speakers are hearing native English speakers, white people speaking to each other, they're hearing words which are the same or almost the same in Creole. But the Creole speakers on the social scale were pretty low down, pretty much at the bottom. Let's face history. And the people in charge were way up at the top. And just as today, people want to ally themselves and identify themselves with the people in control, which means in every Creole community, there are people who grew up speaking Creole. They're kind of shy about it, even ashamed about it. And so what they try to do is fix their natural speech to sound more like the Buckras way of talking. And some of them can do it okay, some of them don't. But either way, just changing your natural speech to the people who control you does not make you one of them. So you have to be proud of the way you do speak, certainly learn the way that they speak so you can function in their world. Don't show them the way that you speak because that's private in your own world. Is this making sense?
Yep.
All right. Let's now go and look at session number 5. And the point I make up top is that based on the various sessions we've already shared, you should have an idea of how the grammar of Seminole is quite different from the grammar of English, even though the words, a lot of the words look familiar. It's not the same language. Please do not think that you're speaking a weird sort of English. You are not. You're speaking a separate language. I brought up in session 5 the question, the issue, the subject of verbs, because it's mostly in how verbs behave that Seminole is different from English. Remember that English makes use of all sorts of endings that get tacked onto words to change the tense and the who's doing what and so on. None of those endings, except for 1 or 2, which I'll get to, apply to Creole grammar generally and Seminole specifically, because to show grammatical relationships, you don't stick endings on words, you just use a whole separate word. And one of the exceptions is the English ending ing.
Our language.
Like sing, singing, run, running. So that ing, which is pretty much pronounced in, not ing, seems to have a grammatical function in Seminole as well. Now, I have to say this with sorrow, but when I was talking to the old people who knew the language, every time I got a call from Brackett or from Nacimiento, I would hear, we just lost. The people who spoke the language were all in their 80s and 90s, and we were losing them pretty much on a regular basis. And as they passed away, they took with them not just the language, but also the culture, the beliefs, the recipes, the spirituality. It's gone. And that's why, at least as far as the language goes, what you folks are doing on this website is a wonderful thing, because if you don't do it, it's gone. That's the end of it. It's something you have to carry with you and pass on. If you all got kids, pass it on. Okay, I get emotional about this because when I came to live in this country back in the 70s and I first met all of y'all, there were lots of people who could talk Seminole. Now it's a tiny handful, and most of them aren't set up to engage in a debate, a dialogue about the language. They're not, their minds aren't thinking like that. So it's up to this generation to carry on the torch of Black Seminole identity and language. Be a hell of a thing if it got lost. All right. I'm sorry, I got sidetracked there, but getting back to the grammar part, and I was talking about the difference between the grammar of English and the grammar of Afro-Seminole. And the big difference is that English grammar operates on the basis of endings stuck onto words. One dog, two dogs, right? You stick an S to make it plural. Those endings, all but a couple, do not carry over into Creole grammar. So if you show a plural in English with an S on the end, you don't do it in Creole, you do it with a whole separate word. And Creole grammar works, again with one or two exceptions, with a separate word, not an ending. So coming back to this ing, Creole speakers are gonna do this, add these endings when they are around speakers of English and they're listening and they can hear that English does it this way. And maybe we want to sound more like that. So let's us start doing it this way. And so for those Seminoles who have listened to English all around them, that's much more the case in Texas than in Mexico, much more the case probably in Oklahoma than in Mexico, little changes start to happen. And some people will start to say, I'd go, using the duh, meaning it's something that's happening. But other people might want to sound a bit more English. They'll think it steps them up a bit socially, and they'll say, I going. Instead of I'd go, they'll say, I going. Well, okay. But it still didn't work out. Certainly socially, it didn't work out because it didn't make them Englishmen. It made them Seminoles trying to sound a bit like Englishmen, which is silly. But Creole grammar took over. And so what we find, I think what we found, and as I was saying, when I was deep into this back in the 70s and 80s, the people who could teach me were passing on. So I wasn't able to get enough information to be sure about what I think was going on, which is to say, looking at the printout, duh has a couple of meanings by itself. It could mean something that's happening at this very minute. I'd go. So I could say, I'd go to school. I am going to school. And it could mean something that happens all the time, but not necessarily at the moment. So I could still say, I'd go to school every Thursday, right? And today's Saturday. So you're not talking about now, you're talking about what you do regularly, but not necessarily now. So one of these, linguists have words for this. Linguists would say if it's something that's happening right now, it's a continuous action. You're in the middle of the action. I'm on my way to school. I'm walking to school. Habitual means you do it as a habit, but you may not be doing it now. English grammar also makes this distinction, because if I say to you in English, I'm going to school, don't stop me, I'm late, because I'm going to school right now, I'm in a hurry. Or, what are you doing these days? Well, I'm going to school. It may be midnight with that conversation, but you could still say the same thing. Generally, Creole grammar can sort those two things out, but have a different way of expressing that. But for Seminole, they seem to have collapsed together. So what we have now are, and the examples I've given you are, if you're looking at your paper, Petey the Cratchy Head. Pete is scratching his head. And that means one thing, from Petey scratching his head. Pete is scratching his head. And then you've got all of them together, Petey da scratching his head. So these three things mean something different for the speaker from the point of view of grammar. I don't think we should get any more into that right now. It's a little of a fine distinction, and it could get a little boring when I start talking about this. So I will come back to that. And if you read what you printed out, it will give a tiny bit more information, but I'll come back to that. Let's move on. Well, there's an example here which may clarify it. Look down a bit, and it says, Mary going to school. Mary going to school. Now, Mary going to school means she's back in school. Not going there right now, but she's back in school. She's going to school these days. But Mary going to school means she is on her way to school at this very moment. See the difference? But what I understood, and I may be wrong, is that not everybody makes that distinction. Okay. I mentioned a little bit ago that although Creole languages generally work with separate words for things and not endings on words for the grammar, there are some exceptions. I think I may have already talked about the comparison of words, so that in English you would say, this one is big, this one is bigger, and this one is the biggest, right? We stick those and s on the end. Well, Seminole does it too. There is an alternative where you can, instead of saying bigger, you could put mo in front, and you could say this one mo big, but it usually came out as mo bigger. This one mo bigger than that one. Other Creoles do it very differently, but that's how Seminole does it. But some other endings and other verb forms are would and could and should. In English grammar, these comes from will and can and shall. So if you say will in the past tense, you say would. I will do it, I would do it. I shall do it, I should do it. I can do it, I could do it. And those little endings also are in Seminole. So when we start to look at the texts, we're going to see some of that. The next page has a bunch of sentences to illustrate these verb forms. What's going to be happening from now on, since you've got a whole bunch of the grammar, is a lot of reading stories and texts and recipes in the language. And it's really the very best way to learn the language is to read texts, stories, recipes, texts. And as we go through them, and I will stop and explain a point. I really, really hope you will be making notes as you go along. And when you have a question or something that didn't make sense, bring it up when we talk. Email me, we'll deal with it. But let's look at some of these sentences. And up at the top, we got, remember Otis affixed that toa pinjin if huna some nice. Maybe Otis would fix up that toa pinjin, that messed up engine in a car, if huna some nice. If you all ask him nicely, there's an would. Next one. If huna been a tenterum before, you'd have done fix already. If you had taken care of it before already, it would have already been fixed. All right, let me do that again. If huna bina is been da. Remember, those two can go together. So it's the past tense and the be. So bina means had tenterum, paid attention to it, attended to it. Remember, is it, he, she. Before, he would have done fix. Now, done fix is a verb construction which is passive, because remember, you don't have endings on these words. So I could say, he done fix them. He had fixed it. He had mended it. But I could also say, he done fix, which means it had been fixed. Been fixed. It would have been fixed. Not somebody who did it, but a passive construction. It would have been fixed already. Next one. I still could ask him, but I still could ask him or her or it. And I could ask him long before now. You all could have asked him or her long before now. There's no should. Should means in English, you should do it, means you've got to do it. But the way you say that in Seminoles is you have to do it. So you have to do it. You have to get to the doctor right now. You've got to get to the doctor right now. Best you go see the doctor. It's best that you go and see the doctor. All right, now at the bottom of that page, what I've been talking about is the and ist in English, big, bigger, biggest. In Seminole, it's and is, and So you could say, Disha Gumba, bigger Nadawan with Ipan de Floyanda. Say that again. Disha Gumba, this here drum. Gumba is an African word, means a drum. bigger na, bigger than. Now on that one, we, which, depend the floor, yonder, which is on the floor over there. Dishagumbe mo bigger, na, that one we depend the floor yonder. So you can say bigger, na, or you can say mo bigger. And you could even say mo bigger, na. Memorize these constructions, use them in your English. And what I've recommended early on in the sessions was, okay, y'all speak English every day. Try and substitute some of the Seminole grammar into your English, but still keep it English, but just do that and get used to it, even if you're just talking to yourself. And gradually you'll be replacing English grammar with Seminole grammar. And that's an easy way to learn it. Be emailing and texting each other. You've got everybody's email addresses, I think, on the listserv which goes out. Get to know each other, start conversations, at least in email. If you feel confident, share telephone numbers and talk to each other. Try and talk in Seminole to each other. Okay, the negative. Now, the negative for just about all the verbs is just na. So, I'd go, I am going. I'm not a go, I'm not going. You just put na. Think of Spanish. Como, no como. You just put the na in front. But with this little set of words, you don't put the na in front, you put on the end. So could means could, but couldn't means couldn't, just like it is. Wouldn't means would and wouldn't. Now, kin, meaning can, I can do them, I can do it, has its own separate negative, which is kyan. I can do them, I cannot do it. Separate. Here's a sentence. Dan asti me kya happy se from the la pondara poman. Dan asti me kya happy se from the la pondara poman. That nasty Meme, happens to be my daughter, Meme, cannot help herself from laughing, the laugh is laughing, con dara poman, at that old man. All right, I got a little part in here about variability, which means you cannot just talk Seminole according to the lessons coming at you here, because nobody talks the same all the time. And I give some examples here. Do you say, I don't have any? Do you say, I haven't got any? Say, I ain't got none? These are all different ways of saying exactly the same thing. And there are different ways of saying the same thing in Seminole as well. Mostly what you're getting is the deep, broad Seminole, because it's the least like English. And the less like English it is, the easier it is to keep the two separate, because there's a strong urge to make your Seminole sound more English. This is what speakers would try to do because of the social setup, but don't do that. So you can read that on your own. There are different ways of saying exactly the same thing, and you'll hear all of the time. Same with abbreviations. Really, the abbreviation section should be there in the variability section, because there are lots of abbreviations too. Hana, which means you or y'all. You could say Hana en duam, you will do it. But people would say Hanen duam. an abbreviated bit with an apostrophe. Huna and duum instead of huna and duum. Okay, now here comes the good part. The story. And I know we did this before. Now I can't find my story. Oh, here it is. It's on the mic. Really, the best way to understand and use the language and to see the grammar is to go through texts. And this is the story we started with last month, and several of you were not online. So I'm going to start from the beginning and we'll go through to the end. There was a recipe here, but I will save that. It's the potato greens. Save that for next time. We still got half a year to go. So we're looking at a little story called the Two Tira and the Poon. That means the two little girls and the spoon. All right. One day, one old granny been dead. We sent one illegal child to go to the river. Go to the river for Washidari Pan and Poon. All right. One day there was an old granny. And remember, one doesn't necessarily mean just one. It can mean a. So one old granny been dead. There was an old granny. And this use of de means exist, to be. There was an old granny. Where is who? Send one little grandchild, gal child. Now, gal child means granddaughter. Gal means girl. So a girl child is a daughter. He sent one, Lee is little, small, gal child for go to the river to wash the dirty pan and pool. So she sent her to the river to wash her dirty pan or dish and spoon. Time he come back, the gal realized say been left the pool behind, but he'd been too afraid for say. The time that she came, by the time means by the time that she came back, the girl realized say means that. He been left the pool. Been makes it past tense. Left is leave, the pool. She realized that she had left the spoon behind. But he'd been too afraid to say, but she was too afraid to say. Okay. Evening come, and them sit on the table for eat. The evening came, and they sat at the table to eat. The old granny done ready for serve up the rice, but he can't find the big food. The old lady, the old granny, was ready. She done ready to serve up the rice, but she cannot find her big spoon. He not see him anyway. She did not see it anywhere. He said, yeah, auntie, I've been sending her for go wash receiving pool. Auntie means, didn't I? Isn't it? Wasn't it? Auntie, any? Auntie, I've been sending her for go wash receiving pool. Didn't I send you to go and wash our serving spoon, our ladle? We say did. Now, we say means where. E, of course, is it. De, like I just said, means to exist, to be. So we say de means where is it? You left him to the river. Did you leave it at the river? You best go bring them back before I whop you good. You better go and bring it back before I whop you good. The gal go back to the river, but he can't find the spoon. Girl goes back to the river, but she can't find the spoon. He terrified for go home. So he dares to sit down next to the river to cry. She is scared to go home, so she just sat at the, she just is sitting, sit down. She's just now sitting next to the river, crying. Bambai, one old woman passed by and he see him to cry. Soon, Bambai means soon. An old lady passed by and she saw her crying. He asked him, "I couldn't cry, my daughter. Why are you crying, my daughter? Mek, what is it that makes you cry?" In other words, why? The gal tell him, say, now, the girl told her that. This word say means that after certain verbs. The gal tell him, say, he lost one poon. Lost means lose, never changes. Lost means lose. If you want to say lost, you'd have to say been lost or done lost. Where he been pushed for wash and he failed for go home without him. She lost a spoon that she was supposed to have washed, but she is afraid to go home without it. The old woman tell him, say, he can help him, but first if a grubby dirty foot them good and clean. The old woman told her that she could help her, but first she must. Now here's another use of fa, which means must. Usually it means to in front of a verb. For set, for go, it means to in English. But here it can also mean must. So he can help him, she can help her, but first if a grubby dirty foot them good and clean. But first she must scrub her dirty feet. Remember, to make a plural, you don't stick an S on the end. You just put the separate word them. So foot them would mean feet. So the old lady said, yeah, I can help you, but first, if you want my help, you gotta scrub my foot, my dirty feet, clean. The gal agreed, the girl agreed. When he done for clean the old woman's foot, when she had done cleaned the old lady's feet, the old woman tell him for go along the river some more, and then meet up with one next old woman where he can help him. When she had done cleaning the old woman's feet, remember, you don't make a plural with an S, so foot can be foot or feet. The old woman tell him for go along the river, to go along the river some more, and he end. Now, end for you new people, end means will in this context, is the future. So, yeah, meet up. She will meet up with one next old woman, Weki Hepam, a next old lady who she can help her. So the so he do. Da means it is, so he do. It is so, it is such that she did. When he meet the second old woman, he tell him how the first old woman can tell him how he could have helped him for find a poon, and if he please could help him. You ought to be understanding this without translation at this point. When she met the second old woman, she told her how the first old woman had told her how she could have helped her to find the spoon, and if she please, could help her. The old woman tell her, say yes. The old woman told her yes. He could have helped him, she could have helped her, but before he helped him, if a crutch the skeeter bite, we they all obey back. But before she helped her, she must, there's that f meaning must again, scratch the mosquito bite, scratch the mosquito bites, with they all obey back, which are, they now meaning exist, all obey back, all over her back. The gal cratch 'em. Now in Creole, you can repeat something to intensify it. So cratch 'em means she just kept on to cratch 'em. Till the woman satisfied, then the woman tell him, say, if he pass on down the river bank till he meet up along one next old lady. So the girl scratched and scratched her until the woman was satisfied. Then the woman told her that she must pass on down the river bank until she meets up with, he meet up along one next old lady, another old lady, and Dara de old lady. Now Dara means that, it's another word for that. Old lady will help him for sure, will help her for sure. All right, now going back to today's text, here's the rest of this amazing, gripping story. The gal go and he turned up next to river, the ball and holla, tell old woman, yeti him, and he come ask him, what the hell? All right. The girl went. Grammar reminder, the verb just by itself, like go or see or run, means the past tense. So go by itself means went. See by itself means saw. That's very different from English. If you wanted to say went, you'd have to say been go. If you wanted to say saw, you'd have to say been see, right? So the gal go means the girl went. And he turned up next to the river. And she stood up next to the river, the ball, bawling, i.e. crying, and holler and hollering. Till an old woman yeti him, until an old woman heard her. Yeti is one of those special Seminole words. It means here, yeti. Until an old woman heard her, and he come ask him wadaela, and she came and asked her what's bothering her, wadaela. The gal tell him say, "Him granny poon done lost." The girl told her that her grandmother's spoon got lost. He done lost. And if he go back without him, and if she goes back without it, he surely can get a licking. She surely in his future, so will get a licking. She surely will get a licking. The old woman tell him, say, you know, we said it punde. Remember, we say means where. So the old woman tell him, say, the old lady told her that, know, we say it punde, which, or where, we say means where, the poon de, where the spoon be. But if a crubby duddy foot before he tell him. But she must scrub her dirty feet before she tells her. The gal quench up his face and he tell the woman, oh, wait a minute now, wait a minute. We're on the one part of the story here. I'm ahead of myself because what I've been telling you about is the other sister, the jealous sister. So back up a bit and look, see if you can find the two Titta and the Poon part 2. Can y'all find that? Gabrielle, can you find it? It's the second little picture of the girls with the spoon.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, you got it? All right, because this is a story about jealousy and obedience. All right, let me back up a little bit. And we're still looking at the first little sister who is looking for her spoon. She's gone. She's met one old lady who passes her on to another old lady, who passes her on to a third old lady. And when he meet the third old woman, and when she met the third old lady, he tell him how the second old woman been tell him he could have helped him for find a poon for sure. For sure, he could certainly help her find the spoon for sure, for sure. And if he please could help him, and if she please could help her do that. The old woman tell him, say, yes, he sure enough could have helped him, accusing him for first clean off the nasty soul leg and put medicine on him. The old lady told her, yes, she certainly could help her, except that, accusing means except that, he first for clean off the nasty soul leg and put medicine on her. Except that she must first clean off her nasty sore legs and put medicine on it. When the gal been done clean off all the nasty and the old woman satisfied, then the old woman asks him this question. Here's the question the old lady asked her. 2 eggs did it. 2 eggs are there. There are 2 eggs. One of them black, the other one white. Which one, Hannah, and pick? Okay, there are 2 eggs. One of them
Recording
is
in progress.
and the other one is and the other one is white. Which one of them are you going to choose? The gal tell him he want pick the white one. The girl told her that she wanted to pick the white one. Then the woman asked him again, say, 1 grain of rice, either 1 cup of rice, which one, honey? So the woman told her again, here is 1 grain of rice, and here is 1 whole cup of rice. Which one are you going to choose? The gal tell him, say, Nama, that the 1 grain of rice in 1 pick. Okay, Nama means only. So only the 1 grain is what she's going to choose. Well, all right. The old lady got the egg and the 1 grain of rice, and he tell him dip on his way. So the old lady gave her the egg and the 1 grain of rice, and she told her to be on her way. For day on her way. That's so he did. That's what she did. Soon as he get a piece further distant, soon as she got a little while away, the gal bust open the egg to see what they inside. Soon as she got a little while away, the girl bust open the egg to see what be inside it. Deso, there, he see one big house full of all kind of things, even the exact same poon where he been lost. So she breaks open the egg and she sees inside of it all kinds of things, a beautiful big house and all kinds of things, including the spoon that she had lost. He's too glad. She's too happy. So then he took the one lone grain of rice and he boiled them. So then she took the one single little grain of rice and boiled it, and the whole pot come full of rice, and the whole pot filled up with rice. Got a whole pot full from one grain. He carried a poon and the pot of rice back home, and the old granny there's too pleased to get back a poon and one full pot of rice. Okay. Now, this gal, I want Tita. Now, Tita does mean little girl, but it also can mean sister. And here it means sister. Where Sise, who saw that, his sitter, now the granny favorite. So this other sister now saw that her younger sister was now the favorite of their granny. He's the right. Case of the rice and thing, and he get vexed. Favorite because of the rice and things, and she got angry. Bex is angry. He tell himself say, she told herself that him for do this what the other one do. She told herself that she should do just what the other one did, and if you do that, then granny will like him same way too. And if she did that, their granny would like her, love her in the same way as well. So when the time come for him go wash the plate and the spoon to the river, so when the time came for her to go and wash the spoon and dishes at the river, he left the spoon upon the river edge for purpose. She left the spoon at the edge of the river on purpose. And when the granny asked him to, what make he not carry him back with him? And when the granny asked her why she hadn't brought it back with her, he just say, I forget. She just said, I forgot. Same as before, the old lady say, you best go bring him back for what your buntas good. And old lady said, you better go and bring it back before I whoop your behind. Good. Buntas is means your backside. All right, now we can pick up the story where we were before. Is this getting exciting or what? The gal go and he turn up next to the river, the ball and holler till the old woman hear him, and he come ask him what the ail him. The gal tell him, say, Granny Poon done lost, and if he go back without him, he surely on and get a licking. The old woman tell him, say, he know we said the Poon dead, but he for crubby dirty foot before he tell him. The gal quinch up the face and he tell the old woman, say, hand them clean. Okay, this is where we pick it up again. The gal quinch up his face, the girl screwed up her face, and he tell the old woman, say, and she told the old woman that he hand them clean. Her hands are clean. And he now air retention for touching them very daddy tinky foot. And she had no intention. He not have airy means any tension for touch nobody dirty tinky foot, for touch anybody's stinky dirty feet. The woman say, very well then. So the old lady says, okay, go along. Maybe somebody else can help her, and then be me. So the woman said, okay, go on along. Be on your way. Maybe somebody else, maybe somebody else can help her. will help you. Inem be me. It will not be me. He go along some more to cry loud for everybody for Yerium till he meet one next old lady. We ask him, do I make it a cry so? He give him the same story about how in poon loss and if enough fine and he granny and whoop the black off I puntas when he get back home. Should really be understanding this. Let's pull it apart. She went along a bit more, crying out loud to let everybody hear her until she met another old lady who asked her what is making her cry so much. Igiam the same story. She gave her the same story about how in Poon lost, about how her spoon got lost, and if enough find them, and if she doesn't find it, the granny and what the black of I buntas when you get back home. And her granny is her granny will in his future what the black of I buntas when he get back home. The old woman tell him say could I help him, but first off, if a crutch mosquito bite with a run poison, would they all be back? So the old lady told her that she could help her, but first off, she has to scratch the mosquito bites, what are running poison, which are all over her back. Another time again, once more, the gal not agree for ease the old woman. The girl did not agree to help ease the old woman's suffering. He tell him he been for shame, for even axe for pity clean hand up until the old cratch up body. She told the old lady that she should have been ashamed to even ask her to put her clean hands on her old scratched up old body. So he go along some more and she went on her way. Then he meet another old woman. He thought for bawl and cry till the woman asked him to make. Then she met another old lady and she started to holler and cry until the woman asked her, what is it? What is making, in other words, what is making that happen? Why is that happening? Again, the same story about the spoon. She gave her the same story about the spoon. And the old lady tell him, say, could I help him? But if I first clean off the nasty sore leg and put medicine on her. The old lady said she could help her, but first she was clean off her nasty sore legs and put medicine on them. The gal tell him, say, for shame, for action, for do that. And just the gal. The girl told her that she ought to be ashamed to ask her to do that when she was just, this is just, here it's abbreviated, des de illegal, just is a little girl. So then the old woman showed him two eggs, one of them white and one of them black. He asked the gal which one he want. The gal say he want the black one because he bigger more than the white one. Then the lady asked him if he had to take a cup of rice, either just one grain of rice, and the greedy big yard gal say that the cup of rice he want. Okay, let's back up. So then the old woman showed her two eggs. One of them was white, one of them was black. And she asked the girl which one she wanted. The girl said he wanted the black one because it was bigger than the white one. Then the lady asked her if she would take a cup of rice, either just a cup of rice or either one grain of rice, just one grain of rice. And the greedy big guy, now big guy means greedy, you got big eyes. The greedy big eyed gal say that a cup of rice he want. And the big eyed girl said it is the cup of rice she wants. He nen, now nen is na en, which means not will, which means won't take no one little grain of rice. She won't take not one little grain of rice, or couldn't feed even an ant. That couldn't even feed an ant. So he take the egg and he cup of rice and he go. He not tell the woman, thank you, auntie. He just go on. She took the egg and the cup of rice and she went. She didn't tell the lady, thank you, auntie. She just left. Soon as he gets some distance, he sighed for boiled the rice. He's hungry, gonna catch him. Soon as she got some distance, she decided to boil the rice because hungry was catching her. In other words, she was starting to get hungry. He boiled the pot of rice. She boiled the pot of rice, but instead of either cook, but instead of it was cooking, the rice been just boil and boil away till nothing been left there. Instead of it was cooking, the rice was just boiling and boiling away until nothing was left there. The pot empty. So now the gal knows say something wrong. You best get back home. So now the girl knew that something was wrong. She better get back home. He still nahadi poon. She still not have the spoon. She still did not have the spoon. So Filet Granny proud for him. So in order to let her grandmother be proud of her, she said, look here, Granny, I don't bring Hannah one big, fine, big black egg. So she said, look here, Granny, I brought you a fine, big black egg. But 10 look at the granny, we knew about the black egg. It seemed like the granny had known already about the black egg because he locked the door and the window them because she locked the door and the windows before he crack open that egg. Before she opened that egg, and when he cracked them open, and when she opened it up, all kind of snake and spider and scorpion and thing come out. And when she cracked it open, all kinds of snakes and spiders and scorpions and things came out. And then chased the gal and the granny around the house, and he killed them to death. And they killed her. And that been due for the gal and the granny all too. And that was good enough for the granny and the girl, both of them. It served them right. And you can see at the bottom is a little expression. And I have to confess this, I never heard this in Seminole, but I stole it from another Creole. And I'm telling you that because in some Creoles, when somebody finishes a story, they will turn on the audience, on the listeners, and say, who'd I get the next one? So which of you have the next story to tell? So if any of you folks out there are listening and have stories in Seminole Creole or even Gullah Geechee, please bring it on. Let's hear more stories. Okay, that's it with the session, but how about some questions from Hannah? Charles, you have any comments? Oh, Jean, you are muted. We said Jean Day. Jean and Angela.
Hi. Good to see you again. Good to hear you. Good to partake of the wisdom. No real questions, just point of interest. It's just fascinating how this Gullah Geechee story, or if you wish, the Afro-Seminole story, has so many branches. I mean, it goes back to Barbados, it goes to Sierra Leone, it goes to Oklahoma, Mexico, Texas, and all along the way, the language
Uh-huh.
moves with it. And I think in our Sunday session, somebody did share. It was Mr. Masali, that I can't remember what year it was, but I guess it was in the 1990s when President Momo of Sierra Leone came to South Carolina, and he addressed everybody, and then he spoke to the audience in Creole from Freetown in Sierra Leone, and it was kind of like not a dry eye in the house. So yeah, there's a lot going with this, and I'm sure you've shared along the way, and I stumbled on a recorded interview with your friend and mine, our colleague Joe Opala, about tracing the song that
That was amazing.
yes,
Absolutely amazing.
yeah, that it was, because there was and just for those who are not familiar, Lorenzo Dow Turner, who was a linguist at Michigan State University back in the 1930s, he was one of the first who really was making scientific sense of the fact that the way African Americans were speaking English was not just bad, ignorant English, that this was a systematic, rule-governed, grammatical dialect of English, which included many Africanisms. And when he went to South Carolina to investigate the Gullah Geechee, which was the most Africanized version of Black English, he recorded a song that had been passed down to Mrs. Amelia Dawley from mother to daughter, from their 15-year-old ancestor who came on a slave ship to the Sea Islands from Sierra Leone. And so it was in I guess the late 80s, early 90s, when Joe Opala took the recording, he and some other researchers in Sierra Leone, and found the village where the song originated, and there was one person alive who still knew the song. And then from there, they connected with the Moran family, Mrs. Amelia Dawley's descendants in Harris Neck, Georgia, and just by miracle, all that madness and civil war was just suspended for those few weeks while they were in Sierra Leone, and they were able to reunite with the young lady who knew the song. It was a funeral song that was sung, but from that, since then, Sierra Leone became so Christianized and Islamicized that a lot of people had just forgotten it. So all of that is documented in a video called "The Language You Cry In," and cry is what it was. I mean, to see those big tough warriors and everybody just so it's a beautiful story, and Ian, I know you had quite a bit to do with getting that connection made.
Yeah. Everybody should watch that film, The Language We Cry In, because the story is absolutely remarkable. The Gullah Geechee people can remember, at least during Turner's day, remembered songs, even in the African languages they brought with them as captives. And some of those, and it was Turner, let's give the man his due, Lorenzo Dow Turner was able to identify the languages of the songs that the Gullah Geechee people were singing, which of course the average Bakras just thought were nonsense words, but they were actually African languages. And one of the songs was sung in a Sierra Leonean language called Mende. And so Joseph, a close friend of mine who is on this listserv, he ought to be listening to us now, went with a group to Sierra Leone to see if they could find anybody who knew that same song. And they had just about run out of trying to find anybody until at the very last minute, they said, let's just go and check out this Mende village, which isn't even in the Mende line. It was over in another area. And yet they found a woman who knew the song, knew the tune, knew the words. And it was such a hookup and very emotional, extremely emotional. One thing, and you also, Jean, talked about the expanse of the Creole world, how Creole languages are spoken by Black populations all over the Western world. Millions of people speak different Creole languages, and they are all related to each other. And one misunderstanding that needs to be corrected is that the different ethno-linguistic groups of captives learned Creole amongst themselves using the words they were hearing from their captors, but they learned them and used them to talk to each other, not to talk to their captives. And so when we look at the records, and this is something I'm trying to do, there is a clear distinction between the speech of the captives when addressing their captors and the speech of the captives when they are talking to each other. And so when the English and the French and the Portuguese and the Dutch and the Spanish and those people recorded what they were hearing, they were not hearing Creole. They were hearing Africans trying to speak the European language. If you read what some of the Sierra Leonean records make quite clear, and watch Eldred Jones, a very special person for me, but Eldred Jones makes this point that Creoles spoke to each other in a language that Europeans could not understand, but when the Europeans spoke, when the Africans spoke to Europeans, they spoke in a kind of learner's version of English. And it was that got recorded and put into print and presumably referred to as the Creole or whatever word they used, but it was not the actual Creole language, which is a private language. You go to Sierra Leone, you go to Jamaica, you go to Suriname, people will talk to you trying to speak English because you speak English. Then they'll talk to each other and you won't catch a word. So that's it. So I'm glad, Jean, that you are participating.
Yeah, I'm glad. I thank my wife Wallace for reminding me. And I see we're joined also by the distinguished Mr. Phil Pompey Fixico from the West Coast.
Oh, yes.
Thank you so much.
Phil is so full of stories.
I thank you so much, the Tennies, are doing such wonderful work, and I want to thank you, Doc Ian. Only thing is, uh, there's a reason why I hate to be called Phil, and if you could just call me Fixicoa Pompey, I won't have to tell you what the reason is. So, but I love it all, and I'm so inspired by it. I'm a slow learner, but I'm in for the long haul on this because, you know, I see the dedication is coming straight from the heart. Thank you.
Thank you, Harpy.
Right,
I made the mistake and called you Phil too, but I know better. You know, Dr. Ian, I was, thank you for allowing me to attend this session, and I'll be back. I learned a lot. You know, I was a little surprised that you knew the word buckra. You know, my grandma, she lived in Okmulgee, Oklahoma, and she used to use that word all the time. And she was a Muskogee Creek. She wasn't Seminole, but her dad was Seminole, and and that was a term that I thought was exclusively kept secret from white folks, but evidently it isn't. And so I was amused, let's say, and you know, I haven't heard that term in a long time, but I do appreciate you enlightening me, and I intend to be back. Thank you very much, Doctor.
Thank you, Charles. I'm happy that you've joined in. We need more representation from Oklahoma. But we talked about this Buckra word before. I remember when we had a session down in Brackett, this word immediately came up. It is widely used in all of the Atlantic Creoles, from Jamaica to Barbados to Suriname. It's everywhere. What is interesting about it, though, is that it generally means either a white person or a black person who's trying to act white, and then it's used
Right.
in
You're
a
right.
disparaging way. But for the Black Seminoles, because they have been so isolated from the rest of the world and have lived for a lot of the time in a Spanish language, not an English language environment, like Florida, Mexico, it has come to mean anybody who is not a Seminole. So you could be a regular old African American and still called a Buckra because you are not a Seminole. But that is unique to the Afro-Seminoles.
My corner of Okmulgee was a little different. Across the street from my grandma's house was a Creole lady, and she used to cook me rice all the time. So she might have picked it up from the Creole lady.
Well, rice is big. Rice
It
is big
is.
in all of this history.
It is.
Yeah,
Yep.
and if you listen to Amadou before, I'm sure he mentioned rice, because the rice coast of West Africa is where they started to bring the captives in once rice became a moneymaker in the colonies. The people who were here before, the enslaved population, didn't know how to grow rice, but there's a little stretch of West Africa from maybe Gambia down to Liberia, where they grow rice and they know how to grow rice. And so captives from those areas were top of the line. Those are the ones that people, slave owners, would look for and bring over because they could be put to work. And so rice is a very important
commodity.
staple in the
Right,
history and the
yeah.
culture.
Rice requires very specialized expertise. It's not like, I mean, not that cotton and sugarcane and tobacco don't, but rice is, really requires knowledge. And of course, you know that the kind of history, that section of West Africa that was called the Grain Coast, partly because of the the pepper, the grains of paradise, cayenne pepper, that is, it was so needed. But rice that was where the slave ships, before they went and got their captives, that's where they laid in their supply of food. And then of course the English, seeing the terrain, the lowland and so forth, and seeing the similarity in the sea islands, figured that, well, we could, as you said, Ian, we can make a fortune if we can get some of these people who have rice growing expertise over here. Ian, you mentioned a couple of things. This is so interesting about this Creole phenomenon, how regardless of ethnicity or language or geography, some of these patterns, like the use of the word buckra. My father's from Guyana, formerly British Guyana. I mean, and they the buckra them. I mean, that's what everybody said. But what I thought was interesting about how he was saying that buckra means, for the Seminole, anybody who's not Seminole, we see exactly the same pattern in Haiti, where blanc in Creole doesn't mean a white person, it means any foreigner, anybody who is not, a Haitian Creole speaker. And of course, outsiders get real confused by that. You hear news reports, American, news media people, they go to Haiti, and of course they're going there with all this hysteria about race, and so they think, like when they, at one point, in Haiti, there were so many crises going on, and they were saying, look, we, all blonde need to leave the country, and they thought they were talking about all white people need to leave. No, they weren't talking about,
They're talking about wannabe white too.
Yeah. Okay. So, yeah. So this whole study gets very, very interesting. You were saying about the Creole languages. I did a paper years and years back just looking at Haitian Creole, Martinican Creole, Dutch Creole from Curacao, Palenquero, Spanish Creole in Colombia, and Jamaican Patois, and then of course good old-fashioned African American vernacular, and to see how the same kinds of patterns are just applied, in terms of African grammatical structures. In simple terms, people say, well, it's like African grammar with European words tacked on. Not quite that simple, but it does sort of follow that pattern. And as we look at that, we really get a sense of what you alluded to about, like, this whole Atlantic African language that has culture that has so many things in common that we would not know it because of all the different languages, and the idea that we don't think that all these people are communicating, but well, as all the Maroons know, the less other people know, the better.
Yeah. There is a saying in the Caribbean Creoles, especially in the French ones, but I think it works for everybody, that Creole is for telling the truth and French is for telling lies.
Heard that one before.
Yeah. So your daddy's from Guyana, so he spoke Creolese.
Yeah. And he was from Eastern Guyana, so he got a chance to go into Suriname and visit the Maroons, and
Yeah.
All of
Yeah.
that.
Oh, I
Yeah.
love Guyana is the only country that I've been in that I actually cried when I had to leave. I had such a wonderful time in Georgetown and Kitty and all up in there. It was lovely.
Wow.
And we got a new Guyanese restaurant here in Austin,
Oh,
which it is so popular with the casserip and the pepper pot and stuff. And
hmm
you have to get on a
I've got to
list.
make a trip
You got,
either
yeah.
to Austin or Guyana.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. All right. Well, I guess we can not wait for soon enough next month's session.
I have a feeling some of these people have something to say. I'm looking at Wendy Goodlow and some
Well,
of
I got time. I've got my my pork skins here.
I do have a question. Earlier when you were talking about the way that some people speak to say they're not speaking proper English, but they feel like they are speaking English that's elevated towards, you know, the majority, or, you know, who they think is the oppressor. Is there such thing within ASC as code switching, or very informal versus formal? Is that such a thing within this language, or within Creoles, period, I guess?
Yeah, of course. Of course. You have a situation, and the one that I have looked at is in Jamaica. Jamaica is a
Yeah.
good place to see Creole language behavior, because you have a whole spectrum of deep Creole at one end that you'll hear in the country, and then you've got Jamaican English, which is just English with a Jamaican accent at the other end.
right.
And Jamaicans, they have a heavy inheritance from the British class and race system that, first of all, the lighter skin you are, the better you are. I had a friend when I was still back in London, from Jamaica. She lived in London. She was absolutely beautiful. She was half black and half Chinese. And she was stunningly beautiful. And she could have been Miss Jamaica, but she didn't qualify because she was too dark. And that made no sense to me, but that was only one aspect of the ranking, which also had to do with language. And the more you could sound English, like Britishers, not like Americans, but like Britishers, the higher up the scale you were perceived to be. And that's how you portrayed yourself and how you acted, trying to present to the world an image. And you would get a situation where an upper middle class Jamaican urban family would pay for a young woman to come in from the country each morning on the bus to come and do work around the house. And that woman would speak Creole, but not English. And the urban housewife, she would understand Creole, but she would pretend not to. And she would kind of try to speak a little Creole for her housekeeper. Meanwhile, the housekeeper is trying desperately to sound more Englishy for her employer, but they would never meet right in the middle. So as far as the not housekeeper, but the urban middle class house owner would try to speak Creole, it wouldn't get down the scale or along the scale even to reach the extent to which the country lady would be trying to speak Jamaican English. So it never did quite meet. And once you have a situation like this, it opens the door for all kinds of misunderstandings. An example would be not so much in Seminole Creole, but certainly in the West Indies, you can use the word next. And it doesn't mean next in line, the very next one in line. It simply means another. So if you wanted a next glass of beer, it didn't mean do you want another glass of beer, it just means you want another one. In Sierra Leone Creole, the word again, and this works also in some other Creoles, again doesn't mean one more time, it means any more. So if I said to you in Creole, let me think of a good example. If I said, I don't love you again, what I'm saying is I don't love you anymore. And for an English speaker, that sort of doesn't make sense. Again, wouldn't fit in that context. So if you wanted to say in Creole, you're listening to a record playing and you wanted to say, play it again, you wouldn't say play it again, you'd say play it back. That would mean play it again in Creole. But imagine during colonial times, which stretched up to the early 70s, actually, in some countries, all of the teachers came out from Britain. They all spoke British English. They were working with kids who did not speak British English. Many of them didn't speak English at all. They just spoke Creole. The teacher is not acknowledging that. They are saying, well, you're speaking bad English. And the kids are getting punished for saying things like, I don't like you again, when they should be saying, I don't like you anymore, because that was seen as a mistake. Well, it is a mistake in English, but it's not a mistake in Creole. The point is, you can speak English badly. Everybody knows that, but you can also speak Creole badly. You can speak Afro-Seminole Creole badly, and you would be laughed at for talking that way. Fix.
Yeah, Ian, in understanding Dr. Ira Berlin's concept of the Atlantic Creole, I can see how ASC could have been influenced and have a birthplace there, but I almost never hear you say the Muskogean word that some of these ASC comes from. Why? Is there very little language influence between that?
There are not too many. There are some, of course, the word Sufki, which is basic,
Yes.
is straight, is Creek. Istaluchi, you know that word? That is Creek. There are other words in the vocabulary that I collected that I don't know where they come from. There is a drink which I was told about by some of the old ladies back then. It's called polioti. Well, it sounds like it should be Spanish, but it's not Spanish. I don't know what it is. I don't have a definition for Poliote. There are words, there's a word for your girlfriend, your sweetheart, which doesn't seem to be African. It's certainly not English. I have asked linguists who specialize in Creek and even Biloxi. That Biloxi has a little place in Seminole history too.
Mhm.
When I started back in the 70s talking to people, there were people, old Seminoles, who knew some Indian languages because their parents, their fathers had been scouts back then. They're all gone now, but Kwaha, right? Kwaha means where are you going? But I haven't found the language it comes from. I was told it was Indian, but I haven't found the Indian language where that makes any sense. I've got a couple of those things. So it's still all a mystery. But the culture itself, Fix, has aspects of both. And I say somewhere that, for example, the stomp, the Seminole stomp, is straight First Nations. I like First Nations better than Indian. It's the Canadian term, but I think it's really nice. So the Seminole stomp around the church is absolutely part of the First Nations ancestry, whereas some of the gospel singing is part of the African part. And this is where the Seminoles differ from the Gullah Geechee, because when they split off and went down into Florida, then they had a much greater contact and intermingling with the First Nations people. And so Afro-Seminole, in fact, the name was what? Negro Indian Scouts, showing the dual history, which Gullah Geechee people don't have. I'm sure some of them must do, but leaving Florida, coming west, was a separation. And this has had an impact on the language itself, because as Seminole Creole survived over here, it retained the old Gullah. When you read some of the old Gullah stories from the 1800s, Stoddard and Gonzalez and these people, this is sort of what Seminole is like today. If you look at Gullah today, it is heavily influenced by English, and it's lost so much of its old character. And you can thank the condominiums and the golf courses and the bridges and the exploitation of the sea islands for what's happened to Gullah Geechee. And also, when curious outsiders have gone to the islands to find Gullah with their tape recorders, people are going to say, I don't know what you're asking me. I don't speak Gullah. And this is what Seminole speakers have done since day one. I don't know what you're talking about. I just speak English. The language has been kept very, very private. And now it's almost gone, which is why these sessions are so important. All right. It is nearly 7 o'clock. Time for my supper. So we are going to see each other again in a month.
Yes.
It's going to be mostly going through stories, but some of these stories are pretty interesting. And if you have questions and stories of your own, please throw them into the mix, please. We need as much as we can get from everybody before it's all gone. All right?
Thank you, Doctor. I have a question for Wendy. Wendy, are you there? Unmute yourself, please.
I am.
Okay. The next session is going to be when? Do you know?
It should be in about a month from now. So probably,
Will you let us know when it is? I don't have a
certainly,
schedule.
certainly.
Okay.
Yeah, it should be latter part of the month of
Okay.
next month, February.
That's great. Thank you, dear.
All right.
Thank you, Wendy.
Yeah,
Excuse
thank
me.
everybody for getting on. No, you're fine. Thank you, everybody, for getting on the Zoom. This is a great turnout. So really happy with everybody being here. So thank you.
Thank you kindly.
Thank you.
Thank you, Wendy.
Thank you.
Jean,
Thank you, Wendy. Thank you, everyone.
Jean, are you
Thank
still
you.
there?
I am.
Well, I haven't heard from you in such a long time. Hello, how are you?
I'm good. I'm good. I'm
Good.
on the ground. I'm doing great.
Well, good. I'm doing good for an old man also. Thank you.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yeah, good to reconnect always. So we'll look forward to the next one.
Yes, I am.
Yes,
you,
we'll be
Wendy.
seeing out Zoom, and thank you. Is that Dr. Wallace?
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, thank you both for being on. So, and it was Dr. Ian's idea to invite you guys. I don't know why I hadn't thought of it earlier. So all the way from Florida, thank you.
Right.
Thank you.
Have a safe weekend.
Thank
Okay,
you.
you too.
Bye, y'all.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you. Bye-bye.
Mudo.
Everybody left. I always am like the last person.